Yep.
Welcome to Courtney on Health, brought to you by MalcolmPresents.com and other websites. Anyway,
Yeah.
Maxine,
Anyway,
do
hi.
your
Yeah,
openings as usual.
my usual opening. So, hi, Courtney, and hi, Malcolm, and welcome to Courtney on Health, a Zoomcast series about how to get through these lingering COVID times, which again I keep repeating, hope ends soon, with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Gravenese, registered dietitian with a Master of Science degree in nutrition and applied physiology. Courtney is an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area. And again, I'm going to say and beyond because it's kind of global now, and will help guide you on a path to wellness and health. So here's a little bit of the song Center Field, because we're still in sports and baseball, football, everything's happening now, which will bring this week's topic in. It's called Center Field by John Fogerty. I'm just going to do, a stanza here, and I'm going to say it instead of sing it, although maybe the second part, I don't know.
Now sing it. John Fogerty was great with the guitar.
Got a beat up glove, a homemade bat, and a brand new pair of shoes. I think it's time to give this game a ride. Just to hit the ball and touch them all, a moment in the sun. It's gone, and you can tell that one goodbye. So, put me in, coach. I'm ready to play today. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play today. Look at me. I can be center field. So here's an homage to nutrition and athletes. And what does it take to be ready to play? You need energy, stamina, proper sleep, good mental health, and very important, most importantly, proper nutrition. There are many sports diet gurus, and athletes look to them for guidance as to what they should eat so they can give their best performance and also reduce injury. That's important. Super Bowl quarterback Tom Brady is the poster guy for amazing fitness. He threw 5 touchdowns yesterday against the Falcons. He follows a strict diet regimen, which helps keep him at peak performance. He said he believes he can play in the NFL until he is 50. What is his magic formula? He stated that his regimen is a mix of Eastern and Western philosophies. Some of these principles have been around for thousands of years. Of course, he has coaches, trainers, chefs, and his wife to help him maintain his nutritional regimen. He said that many people have...
And the $50 million a year salary.
This is also true, but still, he's being a leader in this area because he's following, something that's important that Courtney's going to tell us about. He said many people have conditioned their bodies to a nutritional regimen made up of lots of white or pale looking foods, French fries, potato chips, white bread, chicken nuggets that don't exist in nature. Brady's nutritional routine favors berry and banana smoothies pre-workout, avocado and eggs for breakfast, salads with nuts and fish for lunch, hummus, guacamole, or mixed nuts for snacks, and roasted vegetables and chicken for dinner. He likes to add TB12 electrolytes to his water. I don't even know what that is, Courtney, as he's a fan of recovery fluids. Obviously, most amateur athletes on the high school and college level, unless you're on a Division I college team, don't have the staff that Brady can afford, but they can follow his diet to help maintain a healthy body. It's a good diet to think about. And yes, according to Tommy B, as I'm calling him, you can cheat sometimes. His favorite cheat foods are pizza. He likes to sneak in some bacon, and he enjoys chocolate. So Courtney, what is the latest on nutrition for athletes? Because I think most of us know we can't all be Tom Brady.
No, and certainly not taking anything away. I mean, he's clearly a talent, and clearly in addition to all that, he does a lot. There's training and this hard work, as do, a lot of professional athletes. So we might not be able to meet exactly that high level of, beautiful nutritional adequacy and discipline that he exhibits. but we can certainly make a lot more progress than what exists right now. And you mentioned it before, Maxine. So let's take professional sports out of the mix for right now, because when you look at professional versus college versus high school, even among those three different levels, there are different levels of services, support that are available to the athletes. So let's take the pros out, because they are clearly on a different, no pun intended, or every pun intended, they're on a different playing field, right? Even among college athletes, you mentioned it, Maxine, there's D1, particularly when you talk about the NCAA, there's D1, D2, D3. D1 athletes might have many more services and support available to them than, let's say, somebody who's either playing club on a college level or D2 or D3. So I'm really trying to reach out to the middle school, like if you're entering into a sport for the first time and you're listening, a parent of a high school or a middle schooler, or somebody in college who's either playing club and they might not have those services available to them. Because that's where there's a big void in terms of nutritional information and advice and guidelines to help them properly train. And it really is part of the training package, right? So there's obviously their practices that, these athletes are participating in, but they need to be fueled properly. So I'm going to break this into two different categories. One is going to be the deficiencies that we see across the country in terms of our athletes in high school and in college. And then the flip side of that will be for more performance enhancement. So you can eat to prevent a deficiency, but that's very different in many cases than eating to improve your performance. So at a base level, let's talk about sort of meeting those nutritional needs to prevent the deficiencies we see among high school students and college students. At the top of the list is going to be iron, and that exists among both female and male athletes. We just see greater rates of it among female athletes. So there's no question that the greater the demand on the body, so the greater the training, the greater the stimulation of the production of your red blood cells. So even in a male athlete, we're seeing this. So that could explain some of the issues with anemia, iron deficiency anemia that we see. You couple that with female athletes who will be menstruating, and you can see how that blood loss every month is going to be compounding the problem. So iron comes in, and we touched on this a little bit over the last few months. You're either going to have heme iron or non-heme iron. Your heme iron is going to be from any animal products that you see out there. So typically your red meat, your chicken, your fish, and it is highly absorbable, and they have the highest concentrations. That doesn't mean you can't get it from plant sources. So your beans, things like tempeh, tofu, these are all excellent options of iron, non-heme iron for your athlete. So the whole idea is to get consistent levels of this throughout their diet, throughout the day, throughout the week, to prevent a deficiency in iron. Just a reminder to help your absorption of non-heme iron, it helps to have a little bit of vitamin C on board. So from any vitamin C source. Strawberries, grapefruit, oranges, it can be tomato products. It doesn't, if you don't have that vitamin C, you'll get some absorption of that non-heme iron, but you're just going to get a greater amount of absorption if vitamin C is on board. So do keep that in mind as you're trying to help your student, your athlete, your child, really sort of, ramp up their dietary intake of iron sources.
Yeah,
Green
Courtney,
yeah, sure.
Is orange juice a good source of vitamin C, or the juice itself if it's pure?
Sure. Generally, and again, I worry less with an athlete who's burning so many calories. Juice is fine, except that you do want to watch, Malcolm, any concentrated source of sugar in an athlete, particularly before they're ready to train or practice, could be problematic, because that sugar is going to pull water into the gut. And for a lot of people, that's going to cause some GI upset. So you always want a good source, but without that concentration. So the whole food, the whole fruit or vegetable source of vitamin C would be far better than the juice itself, simply because of what that does to the gut.
Courtney, just quick aside on, I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, I cook a lot with cast iron pans, and they said you do get iron from that into the food. Is that true or false?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's an excellent way. And for a lot of reasons, I think people are coming back to cast iron. So you're absolutely right. You get some leaching. In this case, people hear leaching, it's usually associated with something negative. This is a good thing. It's going to pull some of that iron that exists in the pan. And it's just an excellent source of bakeware, but that's a whole topic for a different day.
Yeah, I
So
know, it's my favorite pan.
With the absorption of that iron. So remember, it's an issue among both athletes, male and female. We just see it in greater instances among our female athletes. Calcium intake. Remember, your window to fill the tank of calcium is in the first couple of decades of life, maybe until you're about 25, 30. After that, your job is just to prevent the tank from going empty. And there's very little you can do to sort of, you're keeping it at a steady state. So when you are perspiring, the heavy sweating that exists, remember, keep in mind, usually these athletes are practicing. This is not just an average person like you and me out going for an exercise bout for a half hour, 45 minutes. They're out on the field, they're out on the court for hours at a clip. So perspiration rates are very high. So the greater the training, the greater the excretion of calcium. And a unique thing about calcium, it's got a lot of different roles. Most people know because it's helpful for bone strength, but it's critical for cardiac function. In order to keep that cardiac function high and supported, your body will do whatever it needs in order to keep blood calcium at a steady level, a good level. Where does it take it from? It takes it from your bones. So your bones will always be sacrificed to keep your blood level of calcium at a good level. So what that means for athletes who are losing a lot of calcium through perspiration, you want to make sure that those levels are high. It can be from animal sources, yogurt, it can be from fortified options. It doesn't matter, but you do need to make sure that your needs are being met. So beans are actually a decent source of it as well. I know a lot of clients and a lot of high school students, particularly college students now too, are moving towards more plant-based dairy options or milk alternatives, which is totally fine. But you have to look for calcium fortified options. And I would suggest you look for those milk alternatives that also happen to be a good source of protein, which we're going to talk about in a second. So your best milk alternatives at the top of the list, and it's in a very big lead, would be soy. At the bottom would be things like almond, oat. They are just way deficient in terms of their content of protein intake, protein amount, and the calcium that's needed, unless it's been fortified there. So you want to make sure you check your labels. Check your labels carefully, make sure it's being fortified, and then you should be covering your bases. With calcium, more is not better. Just because you can get it over the counter in a supplement form doesn't mean go overboard. We know that exceedingly high levels of calcium in a supplemental form may lead to cardiac issues. So you want to make sure you're not going too crazy. Just enough to meet your need, and then don't go overboard. Magnesium. So we often, when we did our sleep session, we talked about magnesium and how it's helpful for sleep, and it might be helpful with muscle relaxation. So if you think about the recovery process after you've been training, magnesium is critical. So it's going to help relax muscles either after training or on an off day. And it may help in preventing or at least lessening muscle cramping. Magnesium sources, one of my favorite ones, particularly this time of year as we're moving into the fall, pumpkin seeds, but quite frankly, any seed is going to be a good to excellent source of magnesium that you can add to the diet. It happens to be plant-based, so it fits the need if you are somebody who doesn't eat meat or chooses not to eat meat. All great options for your magnesium level. Potassium. You guys probably know potassium because it's one of the more popular electrolytes that we hear about all of the time. When you think of potassium, guys, what's the food you think of that has a really good amount of potassium in it?
Bananas?
Of course, yeah. So, and they're absolutely great. It's fantastic. But by weight, We know that citrus fruits have a good amount as well. They even rival by weight the amount that's in a banana. So oranges, clementines, mandarin oranges, grapefruits, these are all great sources of potassium. And I got to take a little bit of issue about the whole don't eat white food thing makes me crazy on a lot of levels. But for today, the average potato, white potato, is an excellent source of potassium and a good source of fiber. So, even though it's a white food, it shouldn't be shunned simply because of just the color of it. It happens to be a really good source of potassium, and it's needed. With that perspiration that we mentioned, you're losing a lot of this, or you can lose a lot of that electrolyte. So you want to make sure that the potassium is repleted. A word of caution, because decades ago, there used to be this trend of supplementing with potassium, particularly among football players. This is not something you want to mess with. You shouldn't even be supplementing with separate potassium unless it's been advised by your physician or healthcare provider. When I'm talking about adequate levels of potassium, I'm talking about in your food sources alone, or perhaps something in maybe a multivitamin, a low dose multivitamin mineral. You don't want to mess around with supplementing too much with potassium.
What happens if you over potassicize?
Yeah, that potassium sodium pump gets off kilter, and you could have cardiac issues or even go into cardiac arrest. So, you don't want to, mess around. Again, it's available, but you just don't want to go that route necessarily.
Courtney, what about zinc? Is that something that's just, I heard during pandemic, like zinc is something
I
that
know,
people should,
yeah.
but I don't know about athletes, how it would have any effect, but just curious.
It's definitely one in terms of like maintaining, it's a very narrow window in terms of, deficient versus, okay, oh gosh, we've gone too much. Same thing for people who are taking it in the lozenge form to help their immunity. You want to be really careful. I don't normally recommend zinc outside of what can be included in food. So think shellfish, think seeds. Your shellfish are your big guns when it comes to zinc intake, zinc levels in the food. Obviously, you can take the lozenge for that. Normally, I would just recommend that for somebody who's starting to feel a little unwell. You nip it in the bud right away, take a fixed amount, and then you stop. It's not meant to be something that you should go overboard with. So those are really they're not the only deficiencies, but that's what we see so greatly among our high school and our college, athletes. So keep in mind, these services are not, there are barely athletic trainers on staff at a high school level. It's not, I don't actually, if there are any athletic trainers listening, or a parent in the district who knows this answer, I tried to find out if it's required, at least in New York State, and it does not appear to be. So it's not a given that your school district, your high school will have an athletic trainer. That at least would be helpful if you have a trainer, because although they're not going to necessarily have the level of nutritional expertise, it's at least somebody who can address some of the overtraining issues that we may see. So it's at least a first line defense against some of the issues that we are seeing. So certainly ask in your school district if one is available, and seek out their support for your child or your student if you think that it is needed. And in many cases, it will certainly be needed.
Yeah, I know a big thing. I don't know if it's still big now, but it was years ago, about proper hydration, because a lot of the coaches wouldn't let, especially the high school level and the college level, wouldn't let their athletes take a break for water. We're sort of, sock it up. You gotta, be strong, be strong. You don't have to take the water break.
Right.
And what happened is a lot of the athletes were fainting because of dehydration, and it became serious. And now there's a whole different philosophy, I know.
Oh, thankfully, very different philosophy. It's encouraged, as it should be. That is one thing I would say. So on a coach level, assistant coach level, if there is an athletic trainer there, I do know that they encourage, no matter what season it is, but particularly in warm weather training, adequate hydration, not just day of. The trick when it comes to, athletes is you gotta fill that tank ahead of the game while you're playing and afterwards. So there's the filling it before, maintaining it while, and then filling that tank, repleting it afterwards. So there are different guidelines depending on the sport, but generally you really want to make sure you're ahead of the game every day. Hydration. Normally it's going to be plain water is totally fine. You guys have heard me talk about electrolyte replacement beverages before. This is the actual category of people, of students, who would benefit greatly from electrolyte replacement beverages. So these athletes out there who are out there for hours would benefit. And I'm just throwing Gatorade out there, but there are many different brands. Obviously, Tom Brady has his favorite brand as well. But there are many brands out there. You just want to make sure that they're hypotonic, a dilute, so not very sugary, for the same reason I just mentioned to you, Malcolm, at the top of our time together, so that you're getting the water and you're getting those electrolytes, so that you're replacing what's being lost during these practices. So always.
But what about protein powders? Like that was a thing for a while. And
Yeah.
And I know that, a lot of the athletes, a lot of the kids in high school, they try to get an edge by having these protein powders in. I was always like, no, I didn't like that at all, and I kept it away.
Yeah.
But what's your take on that?
It continues to be a big trend, and the reality is, there's a lot of social pressure to follow. Let's say the big guy, right? Your quarterback, number one quarterback for like a high school team, or your basketball player is using protein powder. There's a good chance everybody else on the team is going to follow suit, because if the big guy on camp, if the number one player is eating it, drinking it, then I will drink that and I will be as good. So there's a little bit of that mentality. It is not needed. There's a big misunderstanding about the role of protein. Athletes do need more protein. Remember, the guideline for protein for all of us is it's a gram of roughly about a gram of protein for each kilogram of body weight that we have. That's enough to keep us from being deficient in protein. Athletes need more than that. So some would say actually maybe even double that amount, but that doesn't mean you can't get that with food. And what I see a lot of the time, and what I hear often, is sort of after a practice, after a training session, after a big game, there's a lot of this protein loading after the game. What's a better way to make sure that you're getting adequate protein, whether it is plant-based or animal-based, is a consistent amount throughout the day. Your body can only use so much protein at one given amount of time. The rest of that amount will be used for muscle. The rest of it is going to be used for other bodily functions, but not towards rebuilding or preserving muscle. So it's almost getting wasted into a certain degree. Again, it's being used for other things, but people tend to go overboard with the protein, which is where a lot of these shakes come from, these drinks come from, unnecessarily. The other thing to keep in mind, and I remember when we had Dr. Gravity's, Dr. Dorian on the show, a lot of them still contain whey protein. Whey protein for, think about high school students with acne, and even early college students. Whey protein does appear to be a bit of a trigger for acne flare-ups in a lot of individuals. So you would want to be sure that you're choosing one, if you're choosing to do it, without whey protein in it, but you can easily meet your protein needs without going that route. And I participated in. What's that?
How about collagen? That seemed to be the fad nowadays.
Yeah, same thing where there is the same thing with topical collagen for healthier skin, along with vitamin C.
No, the one, like I've been told that would dissolve some collagen into water after you finish running.
Yeah, there's no way to guarantee that is going to be used for muscle versus some other area of your body that protein may be needed. So it's an expensive option, an unnecessary option. I mean, if you're using it, you've got the money and the disposable income, but there's no data to suggest that would be helpful. There is data to suggest that certain types of protein, and this will be a topic for another day, like leucine, for example, which is an amino acid. Remember, proteins are a big category of smaller bits of amino acids. Leucine appears appears to be one of the amino acids that is particularly helpful in that rebuilding of muscle, that strengthening, that preservation of muscle. Where is it found? Mostly meat products. So again, it doesn't have to be, a meat source, but we do need to talk about, where the data lies in terms of those amino acids that appear to be a little bit more beneficial. I will share with you though, when I participated in a conference back in October, and this particular gentleman was, he worked for a protein, and he worked for on elite college level, not elite, college level D1 schools. And he shared his secret among his athletes for food that they thought was the best in terms of combination of carbohydrate, protein, potassium. What do you think that food is?
Not sure.
You guess?
I don't know. Peanut butter? I have no idea.
The peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or in this case, then he modified.
I said peanut butter. I was like, what?
Yep, the peanut butter and banana sandwich. It was fascinating. There was so many levels. Meanwhile, this is like, first of all, it's plant-based, so everybody can, and assuming you don't have a nut allergy, right? So it's an excellent source of protein, happens to be plant protein. You got the carbohydrate in the bread. You got potassium in the banana. It doesn't go bad. I mean, it'll go bad eventually if it's sitting out in the baking sun for 3 days, but it's not going to go bad like in a day. So it goes in a backpack. It's easily transportable. It's economical. It fits like all different categories. So it really is a great message about some of the simplest things that are available to us are really sometimes some of the best options in terms of sources.
Yeah, Courtney, before we end this, I just want to go to the darker side of things.
Oh, goodness.
How do you hold steroids? Because a lot of the athletes started taking, especially the high school, started taking steroids because the pros did it, and whether it be any sport, and you see the for 1 year the guy's a freshman and he's skinny, and a year and a half later, and the guy is built like Atlas. He can knock out the world, and he's on steroids. And the high school students started taking it. Can they take a certain amount of steroids, or is that verboten altogether?
I can't speak to what's allowable. I mean, I know it's certainly pro and at college level. If they test and they find it, you could be, benched, or even lose your scholarship if you're on the scholarship. I don't think there's an advisable level for anybody to be taking these. I mean, first of all, there's a sort of an ethical, like, shouldn't we all be just doing this the right way? With what you can. So I don't think there's a safe level at all of steroid use. And I don't think that there's testing at a high school level at all. But again, I don't know that for sure, but I would think, again, there's probably should be a zero tolerance, and there really is no safe amount. If you think about what's happening to a developing body, I don't know if you've ever experienced being on the other end of somebody who's had a lot of steroids on board and what it does to their personality and how angry and how agitated they become. There's all sorts of reasons to avoid it. And I wouldn't say unnecessary. I'm sure some people think it's necessary in order to perform at that level, but it would be considered, the highest level of cheating.
Well, watch a typical professional football game. And you see, I mean, they're ready to kill each other. And you can't tell me that some of these guys aren't on steroids.
You know what? I don't know. I mean, God knows, if you looked at some of the scandals that existed in pro, remember we said we were going to carve out pro today, right. But as long as you do people break the rules? People break the rules all the time,
Yeah. Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa, both of those guys.
Barry Bonds.
Barry Bonds.
The problem is the kids look up to these athletes.
Right.
I mean, especially if they're trying to become athletic, they're trying to, be in that same type of professional sport. They're looking up to them, and they become the role models.
They do, but all the more reason why. It is so critical. Again, particularly, let's talk about a high school level, because high schools typically rarely have the funds to have a dietitian on board, or to have, in some cases, an athletic trainer who's got the time. They're stretched thin as well, these trainers. So in terms of the support that these athletes need, so first of all, you want to prevent injury, you want to prevent overuse, but you also have to counsel them in terms of things like, this is not an area you want to go. So, but it stresses the all importance of making sure they have the proper support around them, so that they don't go down that dark road.
I say forget the steroids and get some sleep, because we didn't get to really touch on that, because sleep is an important part of all this as well.
Absolutely. You sleep, that's when your recovery period is. Let's not forget that. It's really your body, your muscle, not your brain, but your muscles' time to repair. So if you short circuit that, your recovery process, which of course will affect your performance in a negative way, will be the outcome there.
Excuse me, Courtney, I was just reading this book by Sanjay Gupta. I don't know, Keep Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about that the brain does need that sleep to rest, and it does give off waste products from the brain cells. They give off waste products from when they're sleeping. So it is very important for the brain's development also. But now, quick question: when does it, let's say a male athletes, when are their bodies fully developed? That they're.
Well, I don't think there's an absolute for that. They tend to continue growing. Boys, men will continue to grow through college. It's not uncommon for a female athlete or female period to, pretty much by the end of high school, just to maybe, sort of cap out. So I think it's very variable.
Yeah, because
Go ahead.
I find out in sports, I watch professional sports, that the women tennis players, they develop earlier than the male tennis players. If right now we have two of the top tennis players in the world are 18, female, are 18 and 19 years old. You don't find that in the men. The men, it's someplace in the mid-20s.
Yeah.
Is that because their body is developed? The women's body develops faster than the male?
No, it's their brain. They're men. Sorry, Courtney. I had to throw that in there.
That's okay. That's okay.
I don't know. Little levity.
Anyway, and that levity, guys, our half hour is up, believe it or not.
So we didn't get a chance to talk about our just 2 minutes. This is really important because people are still training during the heat.
Okay, go for it.
Your training during your during heat. You want to make sure you don't just go out there and practice endlessly. In a perfect world, you should be ramping up your training. Particularly think about those sports that are in fall sports. You want to gradually get your body used to hot weather so that it gets acclimated to the environment around you. So it's important to make sure you take that slowly, even now where it's still warm in many parts of the country.
Great.
Okay.
Well, that's it. We hit our point of the end of this great show. Courtney will post more on her various websites. I'll throw in that peanut butter and banana sandwiches is what I craved when I was pregnant. So maybe my body was saying something.
Although your son's body is better developed.
Yeah, maybe it's possible. So with that, thanks for joining us for Courtney on Health. To get more info, follow Courtney on her Facebook page, Courtney on Health, on Instagram at CLG Wellness, and visit her website, CourtneyGrevenese.com. For more shows, go to MalcolmPresents.com and theManyShadesOfGreen.com. And this is Courtney on Health, Smart Sound Nutrition, Strong, Safe Fitness, and we'll catch you again next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.